This next question is related. What's the best explanation for the differences between John and the other Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, especially with regards to the crucifixion and the resurrection event?
Boy, again, this is an issue of great debate and contention. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus seems to celebrate the Passover Thursday night. That seems to be the Passover meal, right? That's the Last Supper. And then he's crucified the next day on Friday. But in John's Gospel, John has the Passover on Friday. As Jesus is slain, as he is dying on the cross, it is the very hour at which the priests in the temple are sacrificing the Passover lambs. Now, how do you explain the difference between John and the other three with regard to this? Well, one possibility that the historian has to reckon with is that John has simply moved the date of the crucifixion to Friday rather than Thursday because he wants to emphasize that Jesus is our Passover sacrifice, that he is a Passover lamb. He died for our sins. And so John, out of theological motives, might have shifted the time of the Passover to make it coincide with Jesus' death on Friday. That's one alternative, and that's certainly historically possible. Another alternative is that Jesus simply ate the Passover early with his disciples, knowing that he was going to be arrested. He provoked his arrest in Jerusalem. Jesus decided to celebrate Passover Thursday night rather than Friday night. So that would be like having your Christmas meal, say, on Christmas Eve instead. And he may have even been using a different calendar that located Passover on that Thursday evening rather than on Friday. So all of those would be possibilities, and I don't have any firm opinion as to what is the most likely explanation. This is one of those areas where I'm willing to simply say we don't know, and keep an open mind.
Are there many of those types of, I guess you could call it, inconsistencies in the Bible?
Yeah, I almost don't, I hesitate to call them inconsistencies, Alex, because, you see, ancient historical writers exercised a freedom with respect to their sources that we would not perhaps permit a modern historian to do. Remember I said that the Gospels tend to consist of little snapshots of Jesus' life, and that these are not always chronologically arranged. In ancient biography, the authors would sometimes arrange their material thematically to illustrate, for example, the essential character traits of the hero, his bravery or his courage. And so they would group the stories around that theme. And so in that case, they don't necessarily follow a strict chronology. And so it would be anachronistic in a way to call this an inconsistency on John's part. It may simply be that he's exercising the freedom here that was part of ancient historical writing. Another example of this in the Gospel of John, you asked if there were many. One of the other most important examples is the story of the cleansing of the temple, where Jesus goes into the temple and overturns the tables of the money changers. In Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this occurs during Passion Week, the last week of Jesus' life. John, however, has the story of the cleansing of the temple early in Jesus' ministry, not during Passion Week. It seems that he's moved it to earlier in Jesus' life. Now, some people will try to harmonize this by saying, well, maybe Jesus cleansed the temple twice. Once at the beginning of his ministry, once at the end. That's what I used to think. I thought, well, that's how you solve the problem. But now I'm more inclined to think that given the nature of ancient historiography, it's not an error. That would be anachronistic to say this is an inconsistency if John, for theological reasons, wanted to tell the story of the cleansing of the temple earlier than later in the narrative. And the story itself is the same how Jesus goes into the temple, overturns the money changers' tables, and drives out the animals, and thinks of himself, I think, as fulfilling the prophecy of Zechariah that there will be no commerce in the temple on that day when Messiah comes.
Thanks for that.